What do you guys want to watch?
I don't know. What do you want to watch?
What do you guys think?
How about this movie?
Now for our feature presentation.
So we watched a movie.
We did.
We did watch a movie. We watched the movie Seven.
Yeah, starring Brad Pitt, Morgan Freeman, and Kevin Spacey.
You could say it starred Gwyneth Paltrow, but that would be an absolute lie.
Which is in like a total of 8 minutes.
8 glorious minutes of 1990s Gwyneth Paltrow.
That,
Always appreciate that.
of forced character development that didn't actually pan out.
Just
at
never
all.
panned out.
Yep, was not super attached. Overall, I liked the movie.
Oh,
It was
yeah.
definitely a good movie, especially for the time. So I don't think it's like something to pick apart. But there's definitely some moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for mid-90s, it was actually a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah, I know for me, my first thoughts of the movie, just because of the way I feel about certain actors, I didn't really know what to expect going in. I'm a big Morgan Freeman fan. Don't at all like Brad Pitt. He's got big-ass goofy teeth. First 20 seconds. So I was pretty guarded going into the movie, but I did enjoy Seven as a whole. I feel like it was, at least for the time, a very creative idea. I still think if they made a film similar to that in this era, it would still be a pretty creative idea if executed properly. But I think it was. I don't think that it was a bad movie at all. I did enjoy it quite a lot.
I agree.
Yeah, like you said, if they made it today, it'd still do very well. I mean, it wouldn't like be a box office breaker, but it'd still do really well.
Yeah.
Especially if it was a little bit more developed than maybe it was. But I don't know. We're a younger audience. We expect more. We need them to step it up.
Yeah, we need like attention-grabbing material on the screen at all times.
And I also think that we are a smarter audience than they were in the 90s because of the whole, like, holding your hand through some of the story plots and stuff. Whereas movies now, they just, like, give a hint and we're all just like, oh, this is what's happening right now. We already know.
It makes us think throughout the entire movie, whereas this movie just, like you said, walked us through the entire thing. There wasn't anything that was super surprising.
Yeah.
I mean, the twist at the end was obviously a good twist.
It wasn't a bad
but
twist at all.
You could see it coming from like a mile away.
I do think that is kind of a good point to go off of, where it is a pretty blatant hand-holding through the entire film, which no knock on that. It's fine that they didn't want people being confused at their movie. But I think as far as the plot, like the overall story of the movie, I think right up front, it's not a shallow plot, but the movie's called Seven. It's based on the seven deadly sins, the murders.
Spoiler alerts, by the way.
Spoiler alerts for a 23-year-old movie are contained in this podcast.
If you haven't seen it yet, fuck you.
Although if you are clicking on like a movie reviewing podcast and you see the title is Seven, you haven't watched it yet, that should be expected, but you never know.
For a movie
Spoiler
review
alerts.
podcast,
Spoiler
there's, I
alerts.
mean, spoiler alerts are a given, but still, spoiler alerts.
Yes, absolutely. Spoiler alerts all around for the movie Seven today. But as I was saying, it's a very blatant hand-holding from the beginning. They don't, again, I don't want to crap on the movie. It's a good movie, but they didn't really take time to develop a plot. It's, we'll call it Seven because it's the seven deadly sins, and then we're going to make a good movie, which they did, but it wasn't like a thinker. It wasn't much of a, kind of talked about, there's really 3 characters in the movie. So the character development for those 3 was fine. It wasn't outstanding in any way, but it was fine. Because they had 3 characters to focus on over the span of 2 hours. Morgan Freeman, pretty much just the old cliche, the I'm too old for this shit.
Weather worn.
The weather worn
everything.
Yeah.
Somerset just kind of trying to piece out on everything, gets drawn back in because it's just too good of a puzzle.
Yep. I don't know if it was cliche back then when it was made, but it's definitely cliche now.
I was actually thinking that when I was first watching
What
it.
year did the Lethal Weapons come out? Didn't they come out in the 80s?
Yeah, late 80s, early 90s.
So it probably wasn't super cliche back then, but it was probably at least a little cliche back then.
I was thinking that when I was like, oh, it's another buddy cop movie with the older experienced cop and the new. I'm like, oh, it's probably not one of those because it was one of the first ones.
Yeah,
so.
it was very much less of a buddy cop
Yeah.
movie and more of a psychological thriller, but Still there's buddy cop elements.
It
to
wasn't
Yeah, of
cheesy
course.
though,
Yeah.
because they stayed very true to the tone of the movie through. Honestly, in my opinion, throughout the course of the movie,
Yeah.
there was never times where even Brad Pitt's character, Detective Mills, I feel can get kind of quippy. It was never out of place. It was never really over the top quippiness. It was more of a dark, brutish quippiness than like just a flat out jokester quippiness.
Yeah, it wasn't. There was like zero parallels between like the partnership between Somerset and Mills and the partnership between Tango and Cash.
Yeah.
You know, where that's a very much over the top action movie with a bunch of fucking one liners and shit. But,
Yeah. There was no comedic elements really.
Yeah.
It was all very to the point.
Yeah, which I think is a good thing. You establish a tone. Marvel, you don't want to spend 2 hours making silly, pointless jokes. Marvel. But, I mean, it was a good movie. Again, we were kind of talking about the characters. Not a lot to say. Brad Pitt, filled in his cliched role of the young, up-and-coming newbie cop very well.
Yeah, wasn't outstanding, but wasn't bad.
Yeah.
Very much played the
He
part.
had the emotions. I was going to say he had the emotional range for the movie that he needed to. Again, I'm not a huge Brad Pitt fan, so it's hard for me to give credit where credit is due, but I feel like the performance was, at minimum, quite adequate.
I think Morgan Freeman killed it as always. I feel like at the end with the twist where Mills goes into the wrath, I didn't feel like it was heartbreaking enough. It was just kind of a what's going on, some dread, but it wasn't. I never really saw it hit him. I just saw him go crazy.
That was easily his best scene, his best acted scene throughout the entire movie, but I agree. Like, there wasn't enough emotion. Plus, your connection to Gwyneth Paltrow's character just wasn't there.
Exactly.
But, and this is the most important question of the film, as everyone knows, what's in the box?
What is in the box?
What's in the box?
First, you cut a hole in the box.
Gwyneth Paltrow's dick is in the box.
That would be
Quite the twist.
yeah, I would have probably liked that movie a little bit more.
It'd be M. Night Shyamalan or whatever.
Shamalama Ding Dong. Kevin Spacey, John Doe,
Killed it.
very good. Kevin Spacey
Good at playing a psychopath.
is a very good, exactly what I was going to say, very good at playing a psychopath. You can look at a movie he did earlier the same year, The Usual Suspects, where he played Kaiser Soze. And, I mean, if it wasn't for the internet being just a landmine of spoilers for movies, I wouldn't have known, well, I probably would have, but I can pretend that I wouldn't have known going into The Usual Suspects that Kevin Spacey is Kaiser Soze and Kaiser Soze is John Doe. They're the same character. I picked up on that. It's probably something kind of silly that I noticed, but
Yeah,
I feel like it's the same person.
I feel like Kaiser Soze and The Usual Suspects was a little bit more manipulative, and I want to say less insane than John Doe's character. However, there's a lot of parallels between the two characters.
And I completely agree. I do think that Kaiser Soze is a more manipulative being and less of an insane person. But I don't think that John Doe considers himself to be insane. I don't think that
Oh, yeah.
just because you're acting in a religious way you are insane. John Doe was definitely insane.
Yeah.
But
I mean,
I think
from,
to
like, an
him,
outside perspective, for
exactly.
sure he is.
But I think to him, the mission's all the same. Usual Suspects. Spoiler alert. He sets up this whole heist and just systematically picks off everyone until he's the only one at the end. Uses his ability to manipulate to bank all the money. Uses that money to fund his final mission, which is to kill 6 people or 5 people and then get killed by someone else. It's a little convoluted at the end. He doesn't really stick to it that well, but yeah, Kaiser Soze, John Doe, same guy.
They really like to end with killing themselves or getting killed.
Martyrs?
Yeah, they like the character probably believed themselves to be a martyr. I mean, obviously for his own cause, he called himself Envy, and that he deserved to die, even though his reasoning wasn't very
Entirely
good. Yeah, it wasn't very believable. Yeah.
He kind of tried to sell the whole envy part of it, but it was all for his own fame and to be talked about and to be remembered.
And with that, I mean, that is kind of an out of character thing. If you think about it, kind of, it's all this God's mission, etc. But he's self-aggrandizing the whole way through, even though he doesn't really want to admit it. Like, even putting himself as part of the plan, I feel like that's self-aggrandizing. Just it's kind of the whole way through, which is, you know, not a huge plot hole, but it is kind of a
Just out of theme.
It doesn't really seem to fit in. Another thing that I noticed, I think you guys felt the same way, was that when they finally found John Doe's apartment and he's standing down the hall and he sees Mills and Somerset, and his reaction is to pull a firearm and start to shoot.
Yeah, it's very out of character.
It's completely out of character, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, for a charming psychopath, he would have a way to either charm himself out of it or avoid the situation.
Yeah.
Because that's...
Yeah.
To go straight to violence doesn't seem to be the way.
Obviously, they broke some pretty severe privacy laws to find him, but they could never lean on that information, and he knows there's no way they could have found him otherwise.
Yeah.
So obviously,
I mean,
there's nothing to be afraid of.
Yeah, they even mention in the movie that he read books on law.
He should have been plenty versed. There was no reason for him to panic, and that outburst was definitely out of character.
He could have just
took
gone
me out
into
of it
his
a little
apartment
bit.
being like, you guys can't be here, please leave.
Yeah, I think those two scenes, or those two parts of the movies, were just the writers tripping up over themselves. Rest of the movie was written very well.
Yeah, I mean, as we said,
Except,
it's
Gwyneth Paltrow's character. But.
It is a good movie. It was a good shell, and it was pretty well formed throughout. There's just a bit at the end and a bit there in the middle end that could have been handled a little bit better.
There was some continuity between each of the murders, even though Wrath wasn't a murder, to the person guilty of Wrath. There was some continuity that didn't stay continuous.
Yeah. Couldn't agree more. What do you mean?
Like, with the whole, like, leaving notes at the beginning ones, or having gluttony being, like, the word gluttony being hidden where all the other ones weren't. But as you guys were saying yesterday, is because he started, like, moving up his timeline. He couldn't be as, like, thoroughly thought out, and he just had to push everything along. With him picking Mills as Wrath, and him being envious of Mills when he couldn't have been a target when he first started the killing, because Mills wasn't...
Well, yeah, he started the killings over 3 years ago. Or he started not the killings per se, but the plan.
The planning.
Because Sloth had been bound up for
a year.
A year. So
A year to the day.
A year to the day. So obviously, Wrath was never firmly picked out, but I don't believe that necessarily any of them were firmly picked out until they died. I think when they died, or when he planned the murder, is when they were firmly picked out. And he alludes to it in the film. He admits he has to move his timeline, and it's going to make some changes. So I do believe he was always going to be Envy. Pride was always going to be Pride. I think he was still figuring Wrath, and he did. He figured it just fine.
Because
kind of.
Mills kind of just fell into his lap, and he
Which
realized
they
he could
definitely
play
foreshadowed the whole way there.
Yeah, like immediately Mills is arrogant, and he's doesn't have complete control over his emotions. They make that very clear from the beginning.
Yeah, there's a line Morgan Freeman says, it's just nice to see someone feeding off their emotions, or strange to see someone feeding off their emotions. Like, oh, okay, so his emotions are going to come into play. They're going to come back to haunt him in some way or another.
It is going to be the downfall of this particular character.
Yeah.
I mean, it was pretty easy to figure out immediately.
Yeah. So, just kind of along the same thing that we were going, talking about the continuity between the murders. I mean, like you said, gluttony was kind of hidden, which is a little bit of a situation in itself, where it's, why is greed so proudly displayed but gluttony's hidden? Why was sloth started a year early?
Yeah.
I think that that's the exact contradiction to your point that it doesn't feel planned out. I feel like that's exactly what it was. He wanted gluttony to happen. He wanted greed to be on full display, and then he wanted someone to challenge him. I think all the way along he wanted to be challenged, so he left a little breadcrumb here and a little breadcrumb here that you could kind of tie together, and that's when you could see, oh my goodness, this is related. This is the same thing.
Yeah, I think he knew that he didn't want them to put just any old homicide detective on the case. He wanted their best.
Yeah, 100%.
So that's why he did just really off the wall clues leading up through each of his murders.
At least the first 3.
Yeah, and then once he was figured out, it kind of fell apart there.
Sped through the rest of them.
Gluttony was obviously a sin of just overindulgence, so it was just someone that he fed and fed and fed and fed, and then kicked him in the stomach till his stomach ruptured. And then greed, the pound of flesh to repay his debts because he made all of his fortune in lying.
Yeah.
Sloth, the drug addict that was planned out for over a year, or for a year to the day, probably planned a little bit longer, but in any case, just force fed him drugs and just kind of tortured him. Pride, I believe, was nope. Lust, right?
I think Lust was after they found Sloth.
Yeah, that's what I thought too. So Lust was the prostitute who got the special knife suit to her lady bits. Not a pleasant way to go, not a pleasant thing to think about, but it happened.
So unpleasant that the person who
was forced
John
to do the
Doe
act.
forced to do the act, was completely traumatized.
He was absolutely ruined.
Who, by the way, I think was probably the best supporting actor in that entire movie.
Yeah, he definitely sold the
You mean
emotion of
the
that.
only supporting actor in that movie?
Well, they had Arlie Ermy.
Arlie Ermy, who played his role of the cliched captain quite well.
He was,
but yeah, I don't disagree. He seemed to actually be like, maybe he did kill a hooker the night before, just to really get into the role. I'm not ruling that out.
Some of the cinematography, that was one of the only parts that actually got me in the feels a little bit. I was like, ooh.
Yeah, him screaming, "Help me!" Like, there's obviously nothing they can do to help that man, but he's just screaming, "Help me, help me!"
Yeah,
like,
that got me a little bit. So.
After Lust was Pride. Pride was obviously the very beautiful woman that John Doe cut her face up, and then said, "Call for help. You'll be fine, but you'll be disfigured the rest of your life, or you can just put yourself out." From Pride, we went. Was that it? That was it, right? And then we went into Envy and Wrath.
Pride was when he was enacting his improvised ending to his plan, where he was Envy and Mills was Wrath.
And then obviously the symmetry and the planning kind of falls apart here because there is no deadly outcome for the sin of wrath for the sinner, and the deadly outcome for the sin of envy is encompassing someone's wrath. I don't think that's the right word, but you'll be all right. He's on the receiving end of someone's wrath.
Instigating.
Yeah. I mean, he instigated just to make Mills wrath. I don't think he was actually envious of Mills.
He didn't die from that sin.
Disagree. I do think that he was envious the whole way through. I think his plan was to always be envy because the whole way you see the self-aggrandization, I don't think that's a word either. He's really proud of himself. He really feels above everything, but I don't think he wants to. I think he wants to be able to fit into normal society.
Well, I mean,
and he is envious of the fact that he
can't.
in
the Notebooks when somebody's trying to be pleasant, he's like, I tried to be pleasant,
and
before
then
I knew
threw up on him.
All over him.
The thing is, but with that passage in the Notebooks is that he also said he was laughing about throwing up on the man who was trying to be pleasant to him. So I'm thinking he's definitely a sociopath. He doesn't envy anybody. I mean, he was saying throughout his entire interaction with Mills that he admires Mills.
I admire you, detective.
Yeah. However, I don't think he was actually envious of his life because he knew that life for him was unattainable, and that he didn't actually want that life because he was disgusted by that kind of life.
And he was doing God's work. So, what kind of life would you prefer other than doing God's work?
Well, again, I mean, in theory, yeah, I agree, but there's the fact that he is constantly just self-promoting and self-aggrandizing makes me believe that he was never really truly doing God's work. He was just a sociopath that wanted to hurt people. He was probably disgusted by people, and he probably did take note from or take inspiration from the seven deadly sins. He probably does find those disgusting, but I don't think he ever considered himself a messenger for God or anything like that, even if he wanted to say that.
Yeah.
But going back to Tyson's point, I just don't think he died from the sin he chose himself as.
Yeah.
He didn't.
No, I agree.
He didn't envy anything enough to get killed by
Yeah.
it, unless he envied fame.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, obviously, we watched the movie yesterday, and we kind of had a roundtable discussion between the three of us, mostly the two of us, obviously, but between us, we had a roundtable discussion, and we kind of lobbied a theory about what if, in John Doe's eyes, all of his victims actually did have a choice. Because if you look at it, he obviously killed Gluttony. Greed died because he bled out. But
He did that to himself.
yeah, he did that to himself.
Yeah, technically he didn't kill, John Doe didn't kill anybody besides Greed directly, and then I guess you can count Sloth, but slightly indirectly. I mean, he didn't actually pull a trigger.
Sloth
he
didn't
actually
really die in the movie, though. That
But
it was implied that he was definitely going to die.
Yeah.
And, John Doe actually kept Sloth alive, just tortured for a year.
Pride very clearly had a way out. Wrath, Detective Mills did not,
being right.
and he very clearly knew that. You could see the agony in his face as he made the decision. But do you think that is something that he was not necessarily hiding? But do you think that's something that if they had chosen to not succumb to their sins in those moments, even though he was brandishing the gun, he would have let them live anyway?
Well, Gluttony was bound, so he didn't really have a choice to not eat.
Well, no, because you can just not eat. He was bound, he couldn't get away.
He would die anyway.
What do you mean?
If he was bound, he was eat until you die, or if you don't, you know who I am. You're gonna die anyway.
I think that was part of the choice in the theory, though. You have the chance to die pure and quick, or you can be tortured to death in your own sin.
Okay.
So, and all of them chose to be tortured to death in their own sin.
But maybe he was never actually going to pull the trigger. Obviously, you can't say that the gun wasn't loaded because he did fire.
He fired shots at
a comical amount of rounds, as movies tend to do. But obviously, that's just one theory. But I did think that was something quite interesting because he didn't directly kill anyone except for Gluttony by kicking him in the stomach and rupturing his stomach. So I just kind of wanted to hear what you thought on that.
Yeah, I like that parallel. There's a lot of interesting parallels in the movie.
It's definitely something to think about on it. I mean, that was one of the few things that you could actually kind of glean from it.
That was one of the few think about it.
Yeah, there was not a very deep movie, not as deep as I remember it being, but it's still a good movie. I mean, still very suspenseful in a lot of parts. I mean, it's one of the first decent jump scares when you found out Sloth was actually still alive in the bed.
Oh, yeah. And they even foreshadowed to that.
I was just going to make sure you made that point.
Yeah. When they were going to... Was it Gluttony? Oh, yeah, because they were talking about if he could start breathing spaghetti. He was going to Gluttony, and he was like, "Are you sure he's dead?" I'm like, yeah, we're pretty sure. Yeah. And then he's like, well, I just wonder how many times people go into a crime scene and they're not actually dead and nobody checks. And later in the movie, that's exactly what happens.
But in that case, they were not going into a crime scene. They were going to apprehend the person that they thought was committing the crimes because of the...
It was a fingerprint.
The fingerprints at the Greed. But same principle, because they're talking about him as if he were dead.
Yeah.
Talking about Well, and I mean, there's no way
Dr.
he wouldn't
Cox
be.
is all like, "You deserved it," and once they
John C. McGinley. I got you,
Once-
Dr. Cox.
once they bring in the detectives, they're like, "Okay, this is no longer somebody we're apprehending. This is something that needs to be detectivized." Then it's basically
I think that's the terminology.
it's a technical term.
That is a
It
technical
is
term.
now.
Yep, it is now.
Nope.
Recap: I think it was written all right.
Most of the movie was definitely written well. There's just a few parts that were felt like the writers kind of tripped over themselves a little bit.
Yeah, and I mean that can be expected from any movie. Mistakes can be made.
No movie is perfect. I don't ever expect any movie to be perfect, but something to be touched on is something
Yeah,
to be touched on.
they definitely had some errors. Presumably, with everything that went on with Gwyneth Paltrow, they obviously alluded to the pregnancy and her being not necessarily unhappy in her new life, but basically being unhappy in her new life. I really feel like there was probably an honest intention to make us have a connection with that character, and it just kind of got lost throughout when they were kind of cutting everything
They
out.
developed the relationship between Gwyneth Paltrow and Morgan Freeman more than they did Gwyneth Paltrow and Brad Pitt.
Couldn't agree more.
Definitely.
They didn't have any moment of like, oh, everything's going to be okay as long as we have each other, because they didn't like the city. They were having some rough spots. She was upset, didn't know whether she wanted what to do. So they didn't have any of that like complete bonding moment.
Yeah, exactly. It was.
So if anything, I would have expected
Pretty
Morgan
disappointing
Freeman
for
to
that.
freak out more than Brad Pitt just on the screen time I saw.
That definitely would have been a Shamalama Ding Dong style twist if Morgan Freeman were the one to pull the trigger. Especially with the, I've never pulled the trigger on my gun in my entire
Ooh,
career.
that would have been cool.
That was also decent foreshadowing because they knew they also said that Mills, pulled his gun once and shot it once, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So he's willing to use his gun. Whereas with Somerset, he said he's never had to pull it, never had to use it.
Yeah.
It acted pretty well, especially by Morgan Freeman.
Yeah.
Mormon Friedkin.
Yes.
Morgan Freeman and Kevin Spacey were definitely the better actors.
Brad Pitt was
Brad Pitt filled his role.
Yeah.
Like
didn't do
Tex,
exceptional, but didn't do bad at all. Cinematography, the film style, there was a lot of good parts.
There was a lot of really decent angles and that really kind of helped drive the snes, kept your eyes right where they should be. But yeah, there was some parts that were just not very good.
Yeah.
They were either too close or they were too low.
With that low camera upward angle
Yeah.
that you don't like.
Yeah, it makes me kind of nauseous.
I know there were parts where they like kind of gave me the anxiety, like when he was in the dark room and his flashlight kept like cutting out, and I'm like,
What was that though? That was so dumb because
Yeah.
they wanted to allude that there was some impending danger or some impending threat or something to that effect, and it was just like, what's he gonna do? Walk back into a room full of police officers?
I think it just wanted to keep
Like-
your attention on some of the smaller details
It's
where
just-
otherwise you could have glazed over it.
Yeah.
Well, what smaller details did you catch that I didn't catch?
No, like because of the pictures where if they didn't have that to try and keep your attention, he would have just been looking at pictures.
That's what he was doing.
He
I
was-
didn't
he
feel
was struggling-
I
he
didn't
was
feel
struggling to
drawn
look
into
at.
the scene.
He was also getting frustrated too, which was showing more of his
Okay.
emotionality.
Okay. Well, I missed that because I'm a rube.
It was also like from a filming standpoint, it was really good working with the red of the darkroom light and the white of the flashlight flashing on and off.
Yeah.
It very much added to the anxiety and the suspense of the scene.
And it had some of the like darkness that you could see throughout the film and splashes of light that emphasized some things.
Yeah.
Yep. I think that was also one area where they struggled with a little bit was the lighting. Some scenes were too dark. Some scenes were backlit way too much. However, overall, it was still pretty good.
Yeah, I could see agreeing with you on that, where some of the lighting isn't great, but I think they did a good job matching lighting to the tone of the movie. There's never any like excessively bright scenes. It's always kind of a dark, brooding tone, dark, brooding lighting, dark, brooding everything. They kept it very, very dark and ominous all the way through. But it wasn't lit perfectly, obviously. There were some questionable decisions.
I love psychological crime movies. They're some of my favorite. I think this one will go up there with some of the others that I like.
It's pretty
Yeah,
fun.
this one was very well done overall. Minus like the glaring, not really glaring, but technical errors
Yeah.
and
Things
writing
that
errors. But
Us as noobs watching the movie can notice where other people that are more versed in film will be like,
it was definitely a classic psycho thriller.
Oh yeah, for sure. It definitely deserves the respect that it gets. It's a very well executed movie for the most part, and I mean, films were just worse in the past. I mean, they're not all the way. They're not bad in every single aspect, or worse in every single aspect, but movies have gotten better over my lifetime.
I think just the audiences have changed, so they need to like step it up for a smarter, more attentive audiences. Where in the past they were just like, here's what it is, and everybody's like, I accept this for what it is.
Well, it's not necessarily that the audiences are smarter or even more attentive. I think it's not the smarter part, but as far as the attentive part, I think it's the exact opposite. I think that we live in a world of where Vine was a thing. It's obviously not anymore. We live in a world of 3, 5, 10-minute videos. So you ask someone to sit for 2 hours, you better bring it for 2 hours. You don't have the right to ask for 2 hours of my attention if you're not going to hold my attention for 2 hours.
Yeah.
So I think that's where it's different. It's not necessarily that the audience is more attentive. I think that it's actually that they're less attentive. So it's always something, hey, look over here. Hey, look over here. You know, it's always something happening.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have time for 6 straight scenes of exposition.
Yeah, exactly. One place where I thought it excelled pretty much throughout the entire movie, though, was the sound. The sound editing was pretty brilliant.
Yeah.
It was never too loud, never too quiet. It was exactly the volume that the scene called for. It was very well done. Didn't fuck up the movie in any way.
No.
So,
No, there was never a part where you're watching it and it's at normal volume. Get to the next scene, it's way too quiet. So you get to the third scene and you blow out your eardrums because you've had to turn it way up. It was very steady all the way through. There was never any anything that really stepped on the feel of the movie. It kept it.
That's something that would kill
Pretty
a movie
consistent.
for me. When I'm watching it, and I'm like, this sucks.
yeah, where you gotta fucking turn it up when it's too quiet, and then it goes to a really loud scene, so you have to turn it down because, blow out your eardrums.
Yeah.
I fucking hate that shit.
I love
Less than ideal for sure.
smart villains. I love
Mhm.
villains that feel like they have a purpose. And like I was comparing yesterday to Buffalo Bill of Silence of the Lambs, where he just wanted to be something that he wasn't, and he was taking lives because of it. Where John Doe had a vision for like a better, air quotes, better future.
Mhm.
So I think I like the villain of this movie, even though I don't think he's what he could have been.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely something that again could have been fleshed out and improved upon. But it was a fun villain to watch. It was a good villain. It wasn't bad at all. He was very dark and sinister, and he was calculating and cold the whole way through.
Best kind of villains.
Yeah,
Yep.
exactly. 100% agree.
Made for most interesting development.
So another thing that I would have liked to seen, not necessarily liked to seen, but something that I would have been okay with, is if the entire movie was more of a chess match between Detective Somerset, Morgan Freeman's character, and Kaiser Soze, John Doe. I think the dynamic there, obviously, the movie's good. The way they portrayed it, it really worked with the story. But the dynamic there between the two, the genius detective and the meticulous psychopath, would be not the most original idea either necessarily, but a very fun idea to recycle. It's always a good time for me. I think that's a really good one to me.
I liked their back and forth in the car when they were driving to the last two murders. They're like respectful back and forth to where like, I think you're contradicting yourself. Oh, what do you mean? Like, there are parallel or opposites, I guess.
Yeah, they're the opposite side of the same coin almost, where they're very, very respectful, very, very thought out, but
Very educated, very just...
but one has a sense of right and wrong, and the other is a murdering sociopath. Film was directed by David Fichtner. David Fichtner is a genius, apparently, when it comes to these movies. I had not heard of David Fichtner before today, but just a quick look at other films he's directed. Gone Girl, psychological thriller.
Great movie. Yep.
Exactly, very good movie. The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. I believe that there are some pretty strong psychological themes to that film as well.
Some dark stuff, too.
He directed The Social Network, which is a very good movie, not
A psychological thriller.
not a psychological thriller. Curious Case of Benjamin Button is a long movie. It's also, I did enjoy that one, but...
Is it Brad Pitt in that one, too?
Yes, he's a big fan of Brad Pitt and Kevin Spacey. Zodiac, so basically this exact movie. Fight Club, Panic Room. He's definitely directed some good things. It looks like...
So he's in this genre. He is in this genre.
Yeah, he's really, really in here, carrying the load for this genre. Sylvester Stallone turned down the role of Mills.
That's probably a good thing.
A very good call, in my opinion. I don't like Sylvester Stallone.
I like Sylvester.
Yes.
I like Sylvester
No, we're keeping
Stallone.
that. We are keeping that.
We'll put it in the bloopers. Again. I like Sylvester Stallone in the movies he's best known for. Besides Rocky, I don't like Rocky.
Hey, Adrian, I'm a terrible actor and writer.
He plays a good Rambo.
Yeah.
You know.
Because he doesn't have to talk.
Yeah, we'll watch the Rambo movies and we'll discuss those, obviously, but...
So this was in reference to that scene that kind of, I feel, we all really liked with the knife penis wielding gentleman. Penis knife for
Penis
kids.
knife.
Cut that out.
Who's that? What was that guy's name again?
David Fichtner, the director, or the penis knife guy?
Penis knife guy.
Leland Orser.
Yeah, he was also in Saving Private Ryan. He was the...
But I haven't seen it, so...
Yeah, he was the pilot that was the pilot of the crashed airplane that they come up the main company comes up on. He says, they bolted steel plates to the bottom of the plane. I wish they would have fucking told us before we took off. But yeah, he also played kind of a jittery character right there too, so he plays a very good, like, emotionally damaged.
A wreck. He plays a wreck very well.
Yeah.
Another person that passed on the role of Detective Mills was Denzel Washington, citing that the movie was too dark and evil. Later stated that he regrets that decision. And sure, he's fine either way.
Yeah, he did not miss out on
We're
much.
not sitting here talking about who is Denzel Washington. We are very aware of his work.
Mm-hmm.
Reading this, New Line executives originally balked at the film's ending, but Brad Pitt refused to make the film if the ending was changed. So maybe it could have been a more developed ending. Maybe we have Brad Pitt to blame for that.
Maybe.
This is not going to be the movie you're remembered for, but it may be a movie you're incredibly proud of.
Yeah.
I don't know if you guys did notice this. IMDb pointed it out. I noticed it myself as well. With Kevin Spacey, he's not in the opening credits at all.
Mm-hmm.
They did. It was like a really cool idea to really keep that under lock and key. What his role was, that he was even in the film. Be a lot harder to do in this day and age, but I thought that was a really cool thing that they did.
I did not notice that. That's cool.
Budget for this film an estimated $33 million US.
Or
And
bank.
It grossed $100,125,643.
About 67 million profit. That's pretty. That's pretty good.
I would imagine that for a film in '95, that would be quite acceptable.
Yeah, tripled its money.
Opening weekend was 11 million UK, so I don't know what that would be, but I don't care.
Guillermo del Toro turned down the chance to direct.
I saw that.
The makeup for the sloth victim
I think that was
took
good.
over 14 hours.
Fuck.
Oh.
Yeah. I think Ryan Reynolds said his entire Deadpool makeup takes about 8 hours to do.
I think for the little bit that Sloth did, they could have just used like
A doll.
some sort of animatronic puppet. You didn't really need an actor for that really at all. You only needed to do
No.
that's
I'm
it.
kind of glad they did just use an actor for it because I think
It would have maybe it would have looked
yeah,
cheesy.
Yeah, an animatronic, especially back in '95, would have definitely
Oh,
been noticeable.
Good point, sir.
Al Pacino and Denzel Washington were early choices for Somerset and Mills. Pacino declined; he was already scheduled to film City Hall, and Washington turned down because of the Too Dark, that we already pointed out. Not necessarily he, because same score as Silence of the Lambs. Howard Shore. Gene Hackman offered the role of Somerset, turned it down because of too many night shoots.
Well,
Third slowest film to reach $100 million at box office. After Shakespeare in Love 1998 and The Unforgiven 1992. Titled Seven, the film runs for 127 minutes long, and the 35mm prints are made up of 7 reels. Yeah, final thoughts. We just want to go around the table, or we don't want to have an open, free-form conversation, either one.
I guess we can go around the table one by one, and we could do our final thoughts and our rating.
All right, Carly, why don't we start with you since you've got the funny joke. No, it really was quite entertaining. I was quite tickled when you said that.
Overall, not a bad movie by any stretch of the imagination. Done decently well. Just kind of there. Good movie, not a terrible movie. 6.5 out of 10.
All right. Some things that we talked about, Tyson, was just kind of how you realized that it wasn't as deep as you thought it was when you watched it before watching it with the more critical eye. Is that it's not actually as deep of a film as you thought it was. And again, that's no disrespect. It is a good film, but it's not like the earth-bending, mind-shaking thriller that you might consider it to be. Mm-hmm. And we kind of equated it to the not saying that it's the same, not saying that it is Saw, but this is where Saw came from. That's kind of what we equated it to. Yeah. It's a psychological thriller with a good gore aspect. If you look at Saw 1, there was a lot of people that didn't see the twist of Saw 1. It's a psychological thriller with a gore aspect. So I think that it was kind of the lineage, the base of the family tree for a lot of those films that came after it. And just like Carly, I have a stupid joke about the rating because we discussed what kind of rating scale we would do for the film, and you suggested 1 out of 5 or 1 out of 10, or out of 10, and I said that we should do it out of 10 because I wanted to give this film a 7 out of 10. So yeah, we're all terrible people. And how about yourself? What did you think? Obviously, as the seasoned veteran of Seven.
7. I always enjoy watching it. I mean, I don't really find anything different nowadays because I've seen it a couple dozen times. But it really began my love of psychological horror movies or psychological thrillers. Is very well done. Twist ending is classic. I mean, it's joked about, but like fondly because it was one of the original twist endings that was very well done. It, like you said, inspired movies like Saw, and yeah, overall very good movie. I would also give it a 7 out of 10, unironically.
All right, you guys. Well, I think this was a good first podcast. Thanks for listening out there, and as always, what's in the box? All right, so since we're going to do that, I think it's time to tantalize our podcast listeners with a quick game of rock, paper, scissors to decide who will pick the first movie of the pick in order instead of just agreeing. It's not a very catchy name for what we're doing there, but I think it's time for some puck, raper, scissors.
From some
Definitely not rapers.
shame.
Cut that out.
You don't want to do another Kevin Spacey film?
No, I need to not talk about Kevin Spacey. I came up close a couple times there.
Okay, no 2 out of 3, single elimination.
Yep, no 2 out of 3, single elimination, some rock, paper, scissors. Are you ready, Carly?
Let's do this.
Let's get
Ready, Tyson. Rock, paper, scissors. Shoot. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
No, it's rock, paper, scissors.
It's rock, paper, scissors, shoot.
Thank you, Tyson.
Alright, okay.
Majority wins.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Of course we all went paper. This is electric, folks. You don't know what you're missing right now.
Most intense game of triple rock, paper, scissors.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Double paper for myself and Carly, and Tyson with the big old rock, so he is out of here.
I was imagining just gripping my rock hard. Cut that out.
Cut that out. All right, here's for all the marbles. This is where Big Daddy Daxton clutches up and picks the next fucking movie. Let's go!
Let's see the contestants on the board.
Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. No! You're terrible. Why are you so bad at rock, paper, scissors?
I don't know. I can't keep time. Fuck.
Oh my god. Okay, let's try that again. Rock, paper, scissors, shoot. Boom! Paper for the W. Let's go.
Daxton the winning with paper yet again.
Oh.
Well, maybe. That's true. But the next movie we're going to watch is... Have you seen the new Jumanji yet?
I have not.
Would you watch the new Jumanji?
Probably.
Okay, it's going to be Jumanji.
I loved that movie.
We'll have to rent it. We'll have to get our hands on Jumanji. But we'll figure it out. And my next pick will be for Jumanji.
If any of you guys out there wanted to follow us on Instagram, you can find us on Instagram at Jekyll Studios, on Facebook at Jekyll Studios, on Twitter at Jekyll Studios, and you can email us at jekyllstudios@gmail.com.
Make sure you tell them the correct spelling.
That is
of
Jecll. Jekyll. Not Jekyll. Possibly another L.
I think it's just one L.
I think it's just one L as well. But again, that is Jekyll Studios across all platforms. Jecyll. Hit it up, ladies and gentlemen. My Twitter or Instagram, one of those two, is at JekyllDax. And everything else is just stupid and pointless, so don't follow that. Or my Twitter. I don't have a Twitter or an Instagram. But if you do want to follow them, it's something like that.
I'm running our Instagram page, so that's basically me.
And we'll be setting up a Patreon account real soon as our social media manager gets her head out of her tuchus.